VTalk, a podcast by vTech Solution.
Well, welcome everybody. Thanks again for joining us today. This is another part of the vTech webinar series, and today the title is Agile Methodologies for the Federal Government and Accelerating Digital Transformation. Again, vTech Solution, we are a federal integrator headquartered here in Washington, D.C., focused on artificial intelligence, cloud solutions, cybersecurity, and professional services. We are honored today to have with us both Chris Smith and Mr. Bill Ashton. Bill, I'll go to you first, sir, if you want to introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. And Mike, thanks for the invitation. My name is Bill Ashton. I spent 23 years in the United States Navy. When I left the Navy, I went to work for the federal government, again, working for the Navy, worked 17 years for the Navy, and then was looking for something different. And the Department of Agriculture was looking for a military veteran agriculture liaison. So I applied for the job and I got it. And I spent 4 years at the Department of Agriculture and retired a year ago. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Bill. Glad that you're here. Glad to be here with you. Chris, please, sir.
Hey, thanks, Mike and Bill. Glad to be with you guys today. My name is Chris Smith. I've had a long career in both industry and government. Last 12 years out, I was the CTO at Accenture Federal Services for a couple of years when I first popped out of government, and then the last 10 years have been with AT&T running their public sector business across multiple fronts, from defense to civilian. Their CTO when I first came in and held that position all the way through those 10 years, and ultimately Chief Operating Officer there. Last gig in the Fed was CIO of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So Bill, thanks for your service, not only in the military, but to the many recipients of services from the Department of Agriculture. I was proud to have been affiliated and served there. I also served as a senior executive in GSA running their financial systems and at IRS and Treasury, and also had a military career. Although I was a guardsman for most of my career, there were a lot of call-ups and more than 8 years of active duty across the years, but a 25-year retiree as a joint tactical communications officer in the Air Force, but working with coalition and joint forces out there. And so thanks, vTech, for asking me to join you guys today. It's always great to get out and mix it up with you guys. A great name in the business with Bill, as I've said, and for the hardy crew that's joined us here today at high noon on the East Coast.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And again, honored and blessed to have both you gentlemen here with us today. Thank you for your service. And looking forward to getting your insight into digital transformation. So with that said, those have been with us before and those who have not been with us before, we are going to open this up with the questions. We'll start the program with the questions. Then we will open up the floor at the very end to any Q&A. So if you do have questions during the webinar itself, you can certainly post those in the chat, and we will get to them at the end of the conversation. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and kick off the questions. And Chris, I'm going to have you lead with this first one. And Bill, I'll get your thoughts, and then we'll build the bridge from there. So the first question for you, Chris, is how have you seen Agile methodologies make a difference in government projects when it comes to accelerating digital transformation?
Yeah, it's interesting when you look back. I mean, the first time I probably heard about Agile was in the mid to early 2000s. And it was a concept that has grown immensely over time because it's proved its worth. And really what it's all about is getting new and better functionality into the mission owner's hand so they can get to their job, whether it's engaging the citizen, getting grants out the door, better analyzing information to make decisions more quickly and better as stewards of the American taxpayer dollars out there. But it's all about getting to new capabilities much more quickly. So I was actually looking for some statistics out of kind of how big has it become. And a couple different sources of one was digital AI that I found, and the other one I'll get the citation later. But it was somewhere around 85 to 90% of most software development today is agile, right? So there's still some waterfall out there, but that proves the worth of the why, if you will, right? And so just real quickly, agile is about delivering new functionality, new capabilities in short sprints and not waiting for a long time from the requirements to the delivery. And you've got the customer in the boat with you the entire time. So I think it's been a boon to any organization that's adopted it. They see the value almost immediately. It's not the right way for every development. If you have a highly predictable, known kind of set of requirements and scope, there may be a time to still do a waterfall type capability, but those numbers tell you that's pretty much out the door at this point in time. And so maybe I'll really quickly just give one example of where I embraced Agile early on back in that early 2000s timeframe. I was actually CIO of the Department of Agriculture. We had a new secretary coming in from the first Obama administration. We're coming out of the second period of the Bush administration. And I knew that the new secretary was going to want to hit the ground running and be able to show capabilities in the policy areas that he was most focused on. So I actually got my development team out of Colorado at the time to say, hey, be ready, right? Anything that comes out, we are going to be the door that's going to get knocked on, and we're going to be the ones that are going to deliver this. Because in the past, when people had ideas, it'd take a year, 18 months, 24 months to develop capabilities. And Agile, which was a little bit new, not new by any means, but in the government halls at least, we could give kind of 4 to 6 week sprints, even 8 weeks at times, and do new capabilities and actually show things. So we applied this actually around renewable energies at the time, and this was probably 2008 was the year. We did some interesting things with GIS and mapping capabilities and juxtaposed where renewable energy grants were being made out of the Rural Development Organization within USDA, and started juxtaposing that against what I believe it was NREL, the National Renewable Energy Labs, and I don't want to get this wrong, I think in the Department of Interior, working with where they were citing renewable energy facilities. So if they were biodiesel plants for trucks, if they were ethanol facilities that were refining and then producing ethanol to put into the gasoline points of sale around the country. And it was a very powerful capability that allowed the secretary and his cabinet to take that forward to Congress and start to make really informed policy decisions. And had we used the old style waterfall, we'd probably still be sitting here talking about it, right? Facetious, but yeah, that's an example of where, and we just grew from there. So, but I'll stop there because I think that's a concrete example of the difference between the traditional waterfall style and what we call Agile.
No, what a wonderful answer. Thank you so much, Chris. Bill, any follow-up thoughts there, sir? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Bill.
Yeah, when Chris was talking about, Agile being somewhat new, probably more to the federal government in the early 2000s and everything like that. So I had the experience, and I'll talk about some a little later, but I think the biggest issue, and Chris, you may agree with this, is the federal government is not a risk taker. So the fact that, you get a new secretary in the Department of Ag, and it's pretty much in every federal agency, you get a new secretary and they got these ideas that they want to do. And if they've never been involved in government, it's really an eye opener for them, because they can come in and, hey, this is what I want to do. And then they hit that brick wall. It just doesn't go as quick as they want it. And it's very frustrating to them. It's frustrating to the employees, because the employees themselves want to be able to do this and take innovation and move forward with it. And so as time has gone on, I think the federal government has started to be a risk taker. My opinion, not as much as they should, but we're getting there. It moves quick with the federal government. But on the outside, hey, this is every day. I mean, you have teams within major organizations that are just built for innovation. and things like that, and thinking outside the box, and really how can we do things better and make the employee's life worth it to the organization. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that I read about all the time is, we have all these great things, but is the employee happy? Because if the employee's not happy, then you're not going to do well. So that's just a quick thing on that particular thing there. What Chris.
Thank you, Bill. All right, next question. And Bill, I'm gonna have you lead this one. Could you share an example, sir, of a government project? And Chris had just mentioned one with the Be Ready out of Colorado, but could you talk about maybe a project that you were associated with, Bill, that successfully implemented an agile methodology, and some of the outcomes that were there, and again, some of the key contributing factors?
So I have two examples. One was when I was a civilian working for the Navy. I ran the Navy's pay and personnel system. It was an antiquated system, and to be very honest with you, nobody likes change. The only person who likes change is a baby with a wet diaper.
Right.
So trying to get the mindset of how we can do better. We're having Gen Z or whatever they are these days and things like that. We needed to look to what the customer wanted. And I would say I was a failure on that part, because I couldn't lead the people that need to be led to take the chances, to be a risk taker and start doing things over the internet, through an iPad, through their phone. So even today, we still have the brick and mortars, people having to go into a building and, do something with their pay, and it's just crazy. So I'll give you a quick example of something that I was talking to somebody who was involved in this, but we were at a conference, and this one gentleman was talking about the fact that his mom always sends him a $25 check for his birthday every year. And so I said, oh, well, there's an ATM machine right over there. You can deposit that. Now, I was playing somewhat dumbfounded to it because I wanted to get a point across. And he said, well, why the heck would I need the ATM machine? I said, well, what are you going to do? He says, I'm going to take a picture of the check and deposit it. I said, oh, get out of here. And so he showed me how to do that, like I didn't already know. But my point was, why can't we let a service member take a picture of a marriage certificate, because you don't need it to be certified by anybody. And the truth of the matter is you can go online and make up a marriage certificate. But we always worried about the 5 to 10% of the people that would do something wrong.
Right.
They would do something illegal. And so we would never make that change to allow this to happen. And so okay, so you get all this stuff, Bill, what does it mean? I'll tell you what it means. It means, and I was in the Navy, it means the sailor who went home for 2 weeks to get married and comes back, goes back on the ship, doesn't really know what to do, and he doesn't get his basic allowance for housing at the married rate. And so the first month, the wife says, hey, where's that extra money? Oh, yeah, it's coming. And then the second month it didn't come. And now she's getting a little upset. And he goes to his chief and says, Chief, I didn't get that money. Well, did you go to personnel? Oh, I didn't know I had to go there. So that's the type of stuff that we could fix like that, make sailors or service members happy. Right. So like I failed on that one. But I was given another chance. And I was given another chance when I was in the Department of Agriculture. I was at the Military Veteran Agriculture Liaison. And we actually contracted with vTech. And what we were trying to do was, I don't know how many people on the line right now understand how huge, I don't like to get political, but there was a guy who was the president one time, and he would say, it's huge, real big. Well, the Department of Agriculture is like that. I mean, it is huge. So how does somebody even know how to get somewhere? So I was in the Office of Partnership and Public Engagement. We were kind of the front door for anybody who was going to come into the Department of Agriculture. So we got with VTech and we said, hey, look, we really want to make it where our front door is anybody can find anything that they want to find within the Department of Agriculture. And we had a great solution. One of the greatest things about it is, if you have any background in agriculture, you know that there's a lot of farming, and in farming, there's a lot of people who don't speak English. And one of the great things that vTech had done for us in creating this per se website to be able to Google inside the USDA was you could select your language. And you don't see that in many federal agencies. That was one where I think we're a success. Didn't fully deploy it, but yeah, it was great. I guess once again, I'll tell you, I failed again.
No, you did a great job, Bill. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful answer. And Chris, I'm going to move on to the next question only because you kind of already answered this in the previous one. But Chris, I'm going to lead here with you in the third question. What common challenges do government agencies face when transitioning to Agile? And I can imagine some of your answers here. And what strategies have you found effective in overcoming those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, there's a multitude of challenges depending upon the size of the organization you're talking about. If it's a large, mature kind of cabinet level agency that has all the component pieces to go do, move from a waterfall to an Agile, or it's a small subcomponent within an agency that's outsourcing most of it and has a small number of resources. I think it's keeping your eye on the ball in either case, right? And that is, again, and I know I'm going to repeat myself, and Bill will probably say the same thing. It's all about getting the new capability into the hands of the agency, right? And so the impediments that people are going to run into are the normal ones they would have run into, whether they were using an Agile or a waterfall methodology, right? It's going to be, do I have the resources to get this done? Do I have the leadership to see it through? But one of the things that derails all projects is changes in the scope. And, to the developer's bane, the user always sees what they're presented and says, oh, I wish it would do that. Or could I have the button over here? Could you change this? And that's truly the beauty of Agile, because while both methodologies, right, follow similar paths where, hey, we get the requirements together, we code the software, develop the application, test it, implement it, and then maintain it. Right, in the waterfall version of that world, it's kind of a black box. Right, you take, let's say you had a year to do this. You divide up the time and say, I'm going to take 20% of the time to do requirements. So I'm going to take 60% of the time to develop it. I'm going to take 10% to test it. I'll revise it and then implement it, and last 20% or whatever I left out there, 20 or 30%. In Agile, you don't do that. You start collecting the requirements up front with the customer, and then you do that in waterfall as well, but you collect it with the customer, and then you go quickly iterate in increments. So, 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks, generally never more than 8 weeks. And then you come back and you present that. So you actually build a functionality, and you prioritize and say, I'm going to build this piece, this component of the application first. And you show it to the customer, and then the customer says, oh, I want the button over here. It's not doing exactly, but you quickly go back, and that shouldn't take 8 weeks, right? That's hopefully like a 2-week sprint. And then you get it right, and then you launch that. And then you go back through that again, right? And there's all sorts of terms out there, like anything else. It has all its own terminology, but I like the aspect of the stories. The stories are little kind of vignettes on what you're looking for. Those kind of combine together into epics. So think the Odyssey and the Iliad, right? Big chunks of a story, a bunch of stories together that make sense, that give you functionality. And then the epics together really get you your initiative or your overall end-to-end application. But that iteration back and forth with the customer is what's the biggest impediment in any development effort. So the more tied you are together in your Agile practices and getting the buy-in and making sure the customer doesn't lose interest, right, and stays there with you for the whole process, the much more successful you're going to be. So if there was one aspect that I would tell, that are, sometimes resources from Congress, the timelines you have to work with are a little bit out of your control. Agile is always going to get you there much more quickly and with more customer satisfaction. As my last thing, as Bill said, with less risk, because you're not going off for a year and building this thing and coming back and your customer was like, well, that doesn't look like anything we talked about a year ago. Actually, I can't even remember what I told you a year ago, right?
Right. Well said. Yep. Well said, Chris. And Bill, I feel like what Chris said, we literally experienced with you, sir. Right? I mean, you were very much that agile leader for us, and articulating what buttons you wanted or didn't want, and we delivered those on those type of sprints. And any thoughts on this, Bill? And you're on mute, by the way.
Well, I think one of the things that Chris said, and you talk about Agile, one of the biggest things is the communication between the contractor and the client.
Yes,
and,
sir.
The way the government unfortunately has a tendency to work is we will build a statement of work. We will give the we'll go out and bid the statement of work. That's another story in itself one day. But once you have put the bid out there and you have the organization that's going to do the performance of work for you, in the period of performance, get all these, like Chris was saying, you got all these terminologies pop, that's, when it's going to be due. And so everybody looks at that at the end. When we got like 3 months left, where are we? Well, it's a little too late to worry about that. And so one of the things that we were able to do with VTech when I was at the Department of Agriculture is, a lot of times you'll have quarterly meetings with the contractor. Where are we? What's happening here? Well, we had them weekly. And to what Chris was saying was, you don't want to wait till later on to find out, oh my God, that is not what we were asking for.
Right.
So we had a great relationship with VTech, and they listened to what the customer wanted. And, from a customer's point of view, that's what I want. I want you to listen to me, and I want to tell you what we want done. Now, there may be some things in there saying, well, how about this? We're gonna send you something. We'll talk about it next week, but we got an idea of what you want. And then the next week, like Chris would say, I would see the right buttons and or the color coordination of them. This is what captures the customer that's going to be using what we have. And so the fact that we were not just hiring a company to do something for us and then the end product giving it to us, and that's not how it was. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of contractors were at one time in the government. And I will tell you, I was like that. I used to say, okay, how we're going to fix this? You're going to get some computer geek. We're going to tell them what we want, stick them in a closet, tell them you can't come out until they finish what we want. And then he comes out. Hey, that's not what I asked for.
Yeah.
Start to walk through this to say, why didn't you tell me you were having problems or you didn't understand what I wanted? And that was one of the things that VTech constantly did with us in our weekly or bi-weekly meetings was, okay, what are we doing? Where are we at? Is this what you wanted? Oh my God, I never even thought about that. Well, that's what we're paying a contract to do those bells and whistles, really turn people on. So
that's right. Well said, Bill. Thank you so much. Okay, next question. And Chris, I'm going to lead with you on this one. Question 4, when comparing traditional project management approaches within the Agile methodology in government, what are some of the main differences and how do they impact project outcomes?
Yeah, it's really that collaboration, the incremental nature of Agile, which ultimately leads to faster implementation. I've said de-risked, less risk, you get better quality through this approach. One thing we really haven't touched on, and people goober up a lot of times, is testing. You get a lot more testing in a waterfall process from the beginning. to the end, most of the testing is end loaded. Whereas if you're producing, pieces of the application functionality, reports, whatever it is that are actually going to start producing as you're going along, you basically test that when you're doing it. And then if there's any changes because the customer, who's been with you now looks at it and says, I don't like that. Like Bill said, I don't like the color coordination. The mauve is not just right. And, and we're being facetious about that, but, it's the functionality. You test it right there, and you basically can go into production for that part of the application, right? And so, as you add to it, you still got to do regression testing. You still got to do system testing. You got to do load testing and all that type of stuff. But you're doing all that as you're going along, and you're identifying, and you should be getting better at what you're doing as well. So I would say it's the pro. So when you go to the project management aspect of it, there's so much more feedback. You're not relying on earned value management and these metrics that can be like somewhat like eating glue. Remember the kids would sit around the big vats of glue, and hey, you're not supposed to eat that stuff. But that's what it was like. Is it's not going to hurt you, but why are you consuming all your calories with this stuff exercise? So they're much more discrete deliverables that I think are tangible. And again, it's all about time to functionality, which ultimately saves you money as well, which is one of the things we haven't touched on. I hope that answered the question. If I missed something there, you can.
No, that was wonderful. No, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm going to jump to the next one just because of time. I want to be able to get the Q&A in as well. So Bill, I'm going to lead this one off with you, sir. How can Agile methodologies ensure transparency and accountability within the government projects? I know that is a big topic. And then again, especially given the strict regulations and oversight, as we all know, the bureaucracy in these things, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts, sir.
Being a veteran, I'm very much involved in watching the Veterans Administration. And I want to be upfront to tell you that I'm very supportive of everything that the VA does and the VA healthcare. But the old but, there's a couple of things in there, and this is something about transparency and accountability in the government. The VA Health Administration was working on an electronic health record, and I'll be honest with you, they've been working for it for over 10 years, and billions of dollars have been spent. So you talk about accountability. So the money is given to them by Congress, and they hire a company to do all this, and then they find out that the company's not producing what they're supposed to do. And so now we have to, there was no accountability. We weren't watching exactly what they were doing, et cetera, et cetera. So I got to tell you how bad it is it's just recently in some of the congressional testimony, some of the House Veterans Committee have almost said, let's dump it. And so they say, let's dump it because there was no accountability. And, now where they are right now is to the company that's now doing it is there's stages and there's performance metrics of the company, which is important. So if the company doesn't meet this metric, well, then they may not get the money that they were supposed to get on this because they didn't meet it. And if they meet it ahead of time, then there's very well possibly a bonus for them. So the accountability on this one, and kind of what Chris said earlier, and I think I mentioned it, was one of the reasons why they were having a problem with this particular program when they tested it in some of the clinics and the hospitals out on the Pacific Northwest, was they never got the customer involved. And I'm not necessarily saying the veteran, because, it should be transparent to the veteran. Mm-hmm. But it's the people, it's the nurses, it's the clinicians that were never brought in to be part of the project and the development. So when they did it, they took that person I talked about earlier, took them out of the closet, said, here you go, and threw it at them. And so now they're hearing from the people who were supposed to deploy this electronic health record, and they're saying, it's not working for us. I mean, maybe somebody else thinks it's good, but not for us. So there is transparency that should be there. and the end user, which is a veteran, should never have to worry about this. And the accountability for an organization that they are doing, like Chris mentioned earlier, the taxpayers' dollars. I mean, that's a lot of money that potentially is being wasted.
Yes.
So I hope that kind of got.
Yeah, and I might add to Bill's comments, because I think this is a critically important point, and I know we keep talking about collaboration and feedback, but if you're on a large project that's delivering key functionality, capability to your organization, and you don't talk to each other for a long period of time, which is kind of the, in the waterfall methodology, you can end up with the team that's developing the product going away for long periods of time and not coming back together. Agile is the complete opposite of that. You are constantly talking to each other, so that accountability and transparency is built in, and it cuts down on finger pointing because you guys have been in the boat together. Yes, you can point from the front of a rowboat to the back of the rowboat, right? And who's in trouble and who's, who did what, but you all got an oar in your hand, right? And so that's what Agile gets you, right? There's a lot that goes into it. I don't want to oversimplify it, but it is that you should not go for a long period of time with some misunderstanding. And I'll give you one example. I'll leave the agency unsaid, but at one point in my career where I was running financial systems for a very large government agency, we had implemented under my team a financial system. I had just come in as CIO in this role. And there was a large ERP being implemented, so think an SAP or an Oracle. The financial system was of a different flavor, but these were both critical to the business, right? All of the transactions for the entire agency went through the acquisition system, and then there was a line of business that did most of the government acquisition on the other side. There were two waterfall methodologies going on there, and while we were talking until it came to a head and the new system did not work, the finger pointing was just atrocious at that point. Although I attempted to say, well, that doesn't really matter at this point. We've all been talking about this, and now, our worst nightmares come to fruition. Let's figure out how to fix it. There was so much time spent on, well, we said, he said, she said, and ultimately that new program never survived. It took 2 years to kill it, but that was an example of kind of two black box entities going on within an agency, both critical to the customers and to the citizen, but they just failed. In an agile environment, if an agency is really doing agile, yes, the agile teams could be in different parts of the organizations, but once they start touching each other's workloads, they have to get together to work through. So the project management has to come, kind of ingrained with each other. And then the actual functionality, right, that's touching some other person, it has to be done together. So that's where I think the true accountability and transparency is probably the biggest benefit for an organization.
Yeah, no, thank you both. And the big takeaway, at least for me, and I'm hoping the audience there too, is that communication piece. I mean, it's so critical. At any level, at the enterprise level, at any level. I mean, the communication is key. Okay, next question here, Chris. I'm going to start with you. What role does leadership play in driving agile transformation within government agencies? And what advice would you give leaders looking to support this change effectively?
Yeah, I mean, it needs to start at the top, right? I mean, yes, the work is going to be done at the grassroots level, but if you're going to take this journey, the leadership needs to be driving it and be a change agent for it, and begin to talk the talk and walk the walk, right? Because that executive's job before that in the waterfall methodology was to look at those things I was talking about: earned value management, the project milestones, the critical path, the burn rates, everything that goes into, right, the testing, all that type of stuff that they would manage until they could see something tangible, right? All those metrics are there, by the way, because you're going on these long journeys in the waterfall method in which you don't see anything until the end. So you could spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a big project. You could spend $1 million, which is also a big amount of money at the other end of this, and get nothing for it. So if you're going to embrace an agile environment, right, even if it's not maybe the boss's idea, bringing them on, doing a little executive training. I was always a big fan in my organizations of, as we were training staff, whether we were doing like project management certification, we were doing ITIL, we were doing some, coding language, I always made sure there was some executive training as well, right? Because executives have the attention span of gnats, I like to say. I was one of them because they're doing a million things, and that's not a bad thing to say. But they should be dangerous enough to walk the walk and talk the talk without walking into a wall or losing their bubble gum while they're walking along. And again, I'm being facetious for those that don't know me. I'm talking about myself as much as anybody. You need to learn it and embrace it, right? And I can tell you, coming out of AT&T recently, we did Agile on our EIS system, and there's no bigger contracts out there. I think EIS has a $49 billion ceiling over 15 years for the 10 contract holders. Every one of those contract holders had to build a system from end to end that could do these millions of lines of inventory, all the ordering, the billing, and these are complex systems. We did that all in Agile, right?
Wow.
So being able to understand what was going on in a story session, how scrums worked, again, the expectation that the leader is going to go in there and mix it up and lead the scrum, that's how it depends on what kind of a leader you have. But you sure as heck better understand what people are talking about and be able to press on the pressure points, because just because you're doing Agile doesn't mean you're going to be successful. It's the age-old, leadership by walking around and being engaged and leading from the front and all those great things. So yeah, the leaders need to understand it. They need to advocate and be able to knock down barriers around the teams that are doing it, because ultimately, right, they're responsible for success, as are the team members. So that's my view of the world on this.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris. I mean, execution is still execution, right? So, okay, wonderful. All right, next question, Bill. I'm gonna have you lead off with this. Can you provide insights into the importance of citizen-centric designs when implementing Agile methodologies in government projects, and how can it lead to better outcomes? And Bill, I know in our effort, we use focus groups. I'm sure you may talk about that, but love to get your thoughts here, sir.
Yeah, so, one of the things I wanted to add to was what Chris was saying on the previous question about leadership being involved. One of the things in the federal government, as everyone probably knows, and it probably happens occasionally on the outside of the federal government, but we put a new president in every 4 years. Well, maybe he gets, or she in the future may get, a second term, but that's it. And so as a permanent federal employee, you have to be, what I like to say is like Gumby, because you could be working on a project, an Agile project that is working through, and federal employees, permanent federal employees, are the continuity between any kind of change in the political world. So the importance of being able to prove to your new boss, who has no idea, who sometimes it happens, I'm just going to say it happens, is, nope, we're not going to do that. That was the old administration. So throw that out the window. So that's really important there. I think the citizen-centric design, while implementing these in government projects and how it can lead better outcomes. I talked about it a little in the beginning about innovation. And so I will tell you that the project that we started with VTech came from a very junior person in the organization. And so opening up your eyes to these younger generations who want to do things better, and giving them the chance to do this, in my opinion, is very important. People would say, well, what do they know? Well, somebody who's worked in the government, and I did pretty much my whole career in the government. Well, we're not going to do that. That's the way we tried that already. It never worked. Yeah, it probably didn't work because you didn't know what the hell you were doing. And now we got some young kid that's coming out of college that has great ideas. Let's try it, because they have to learn also about potential failures. That's the only way they're going to learn and be better leaders. So when I said, we talk about implementing this in government projects and how to lead better outcomes, we talk about the involvement of the customer, but that's everybody. It's just not, Chris talked about leadership. It has to start at the top, and that's a true statement. And you better have an idea. I was not the subject expert when it came to the project we had with vTech. I had somebody who was a junior person who really was the project manager of this. I knew enough to what Chris was saying. I knew enough to be dangerous. And I would ask them what I thought was the right questions. I hope they were at the time. But so I could actually walk and chew that gum. So I think that's my point on that one there.
Yeah, and Bill, one of the things that always resonated with me in working with you, sir, was, you would always say to me, Mike, we live in our own bubble, right? We need to get this technology out to those end users that are in the day-to-day functionality, and we did that through those focus groups, right? And how powerful that was. So, and I want to thank you for that, sir, because that is something I will take with me forever. So thank you for that.
Yeah, let me
okay.
just add one quick thing here that
Awesome.
I didn't say in the beginning. So I'm not an IT person. And so when we got vTech in and we started going forward with some of the stuff, the one team that we never invited to the table was the CIO. And this project had to be sitting on somebody's server and maintenance had to be done on it. We did catch it early enough, because if we would have never caught that and brought that team to the table with us, we would have created a project that may never been able to be deployed because we just didn't check all the boxes. So, that's another thing. All the team plays, it's important that everybody's there.
Yes. Yeah. Well said. Okay. Well, I'm just watching the clock here, gentlemen. I'm going to quickly move on to question 8. Chris, I'm going to start with you here, sir. Based on your experiences, what are some of the critical success factors for Agile adoption within government agencies? And can you share a couple of examples of where those factors made a significant impact?
Well, I think the proof's in the pudding, right? The critical success factor is new capabilities coming in record time into people's hands. So where, instead of getting dragged up in front of Congress for some failed IT project, you have a sharp little development team or big development team that is cranking out capabilities. And that's what I actually loved as a CIO, was when people were knocking on our door and we were almost having to turn people away. Because when I inherited the organization, that was not the reputation or not a lot of people were knocking on the door, right? But by a few years into my tenure, it's not about me, but it was setting the expectation that I want the best and the brightest to be able to help the mission organizations get new capabilities into their hands, so they've got happy citizens out there, right? Or happy leadership, that they're making better decisions by being more informed and having better products from an automation standpoint. So I think that the success factor is you've got really delighted customers. And when we say, I know what we've been saying, customers all day. Customer is the agency that you're working with, right? That you're helping put a new capability out there, and then the customer on the other side of that generally is either somebody in the agency that's using these capabilities, or a citizen if it's a grant system that's applying for grants, or having to do reporting with you, or trying to access your program. So the success factor is that people are coming in and asking you to do more and more and more, and it's that those customers are just excited that they've got these capabilities they didn't think they could get to before. Because the funny thing about being in the IT world is everybody thinks that they can deliver something yesterday, because of the world we live in, right? You pick up your phone, you download an app, you go do something. And that expectation shouldn't be, poo-pooed. But when you're building something from the ground up that meets all the security requirements the government has, you can do it quickly. You can do it at the right cost price, and you can do it in a manner that people feel like they own the car that you're building for them to drive in, or lease to them, or whatever the case is. So, I think the success is you've got a team that's excited around you, that's embracing these capabilities. They're growing, they're learning, they're engaged employees, and your customers are excited and want the next new thing that you can bring to them, and they're bringing you the dollars to go get it done. And ultimately the citizen is the beneficiary of all this, right? When we're talking about taxpayer dollars.
Yes, no, thank you so much, Chris, and well said. And gents and audience, I'm looking at the clock where we are at the top of the hour. Unfortunately, we don't have time for Q&A, but if you do have any questions, please put those in the chat. We will make sure that those get to Mr. Smith and Mr. Ashton, and we will reach out to you through the marketing team to make sure that those questions are answered. But Chris and Bill, just wanted to again thank you for both your service, your time today. What a wonderful conversation. You guys had fantastic answers and insight into the Agile methodology. So I wanted to thank you so much. Thank you to the audience. And we will see you next time on the next VTech webinar.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, VTech, and thanks, Bill. Great talk.
Hey, thank you all. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right, gents. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.
All right, bye-bye.